Hey, good evening, Turner. Why don't you stand up and let's sing? Who breaks the power of sin and darkness? Whose love is mighty and so much stronger? The King of glory, the King of glory. Who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder? Who leaves us breathless in awe and wonder? The King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, you would lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order? Who makes the orphan a son and daughter? The King of glory, the King above all kings. Who rules the nation with truth and justice, shines like the sun, all of its brilliance. The King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, you would lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Worthy is the Lamb that was slain. Worthy is the King who conquers the grave. Worthy is the Lamb that was slain. Worthy is the King who conquers the grave. Worthy is the Lamb that was slain. Worthy is the King who conquers the grave. Worthy is the Lamb that was slain. Oh God, you're worthy, worthy. Oh, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, you would lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Oh. Have tried to make you small, to fit inside these narrow walls. We have built spending. We have fought with so much fight. We have held on, knuckles white. Well, thank God that you eclipse all our shallow understanding. Deeper than deep, brighter than bright, more than our words could ever do to describe. Truer than true, purer than pure. Oh, you're everything and still you are more. Everything and more. Everything and more. What a thrill, letting go to admit what we don't know. So take a breath, open your hands. We are just beginning. Deeper than deep, brighter than bright, more than our words could ever do to describe. Truer than true, purer than pure. You're everything and still you are more. Everything and more. Everything and more. More than we ever thought. We couldn't dream it up. We'll spend forever with you. Won't find the edges of you. You're our eternity, infinite destiny. Go on forever with you. Won't find the edges of you. Deeper than deep, brighter than bright, more than our words could ever do to describe. Truer than true, purer than pure. Oh, you're everything and still you are more. Everything and more. You're everything and more. You're everything and more. Everything and more. Everything and more. You're deeper than deep, brighter than bright, more than our words could ever do to describe. You're truer than true, you're purer than pure. You're everything and still you are more. Everything and more. Hey God, we thank you that time and time again, you blow our minds with just how good you are, just how big you are, God. And we think we have you all figured out. You always surprise us again and again, God. And mostly you surprise us with your goodness and with your grace. And finding out you're way better than we thought that you ever could be. More than we could ask or imagine, God. You've been so good to us. We thank you so much for that. calls out to me. leading my heart to your door, and all my regret fades with each step, 'cause that's what your mercy is for. And nothing but kindness is all that you've shown. I call you Father, you call me your own. When I have wandered, welcome me home with nothing but kindness. Oh, your love is quick to forgive, believes I can be so much more. Oh, and my past behind me at last, that's what forgiveness is for. Nothing but kindness is all that you've shown. I call you Father, you call me your own. When I have wandered, welcome me home with nothing but kindness. There is no mistake I could ever make that could separate your love from me. Every step I take, chains begin to break. Come on, celebrate. Now I am free. I'm free. Nothing but kindness is all that you've shown. I call you Father, you call me your own. When I have wandered, welcome me home with nothing but kindness. Oh, nothing but kindness. Oh, nothing but kindness.
Hey, so welcome to Terra Nova. So glad that y'all came. And before you grab a seat, I've got a question for you, and it connects with our God on Film series. Here's the question, is what is your favorite or least favorite movie genre? Okay, so can you begin thinking about that? You could probably think of one or the other, or maybe both, and you've got all kinds of things to choose from, like comedy, drama, adventure, action, documentaries, animated, musicals. I mean, all different kinds of things. Well, maybe not musicals, but you know where we're going with that, all right? So, do you got one? Okay, can you think of one? Now, what I'd like you to do is to turn to the person next to you, find out their name, and find out the answer to that question for them. Okay, ready? Go. Hey, so this week at Terra Nova, we had Vacation Bible School this week. Go ahead and raise your hand if you had a student in Vacation Bible School, a son or daughter that were there. So a bunch of you guys, thanks for bringing your kids. Super awesome. And now we're here this weekend. And man, it's just so great for us to be together. And I just got to say, if you're here and you're a first-time guest, we just want to say it is great to have you with us. Thank you so much for coming. So my name is Lyle, and I have been given the privilege of walking you through what it is you got when you walked in here. We call it the weekend program. So I'd like you to go ahead and pull that out and open it up. And as you open it up, you'll notice there's a number of different things that we have inside that tells you about stuff happening here at Terra Nova, one of which is this Summer Fun Nights. So some of you love summer and some of you love fun. These are some great Saturday nights that we're going to be doing. You can take a look at it. There's 4 of them. Super good if you've got kids or if you act like a kid. You will love these summer fun nights, so make sure that you begin marking your calendar up for that. All right, so you got that. But now what I'd love to have you do is to spend some time focusing on what we have on the back. It's called the Connect card. This is perforated tear-off card. You can go ahead and rip it off like I'm doing. And then you can just go ahead and begin to fill this out. That'd be super great to hear from everybody. Whether you're here and you're a first-time guest or you've been a second time maybe, or you've been here multiple times, we'd love to hear from everybody, and the Connect card is the way that we can do that. Now, if you're a first-time guest, the Connect card might be especially meaningful to you because with our God on Film series, we are giving a free movie ticket for every first-time guest. So what we want to do is get this from you so that we can send that movie ticket to you in the mail. So that means that you'll need to put your name on the Connect card. You'll need to write your address legibly, and you can go ahead and pick off some of the other stuff. But the main thing is we're going to need your address, and then we'll send you that movie ticket. Also, if there was someone that brought you, you could write their name on the Connect card, like, say this is the person that brought me. You could even write it on the back. We'll make sure that they get a movie ticket as well, because that's just how we've been doing this series, and it's really fun. We've been giving out tons of movie tickets. We've been talking about movies and seeing how they connect with something that God wants to get our attention about, and so it's just been this thing where we're just like rocking it all the way around, so it's really fun. So anyway, make sure that you indicate that first-time guest folk, and that would be glorious. And then for all of us, we use the Connect card to just to connect and to let us know things we can be praying about, questions that need to be answered, updates in your life, all that goes in the Connect card, and then we'll get this from you towards the end of our time together. All right, so we know that that we're just about done with June, which means we're just rocking up into July and 4th of July, and we're doing this thing in Lake Forest. It's the 4th of July parade, and it's something that we do at Terra Nova. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about it, because you might be here today and you might be trying to figure out, so like, what is this church all about? Because I think that like what church is all about is that, a bunch of people that are like church people, they go into a building and they do church stuff, and that's just kind of what they do, and then they leave, and that's church, and I just got to tell you that there might be other churches that are like that, but this church is a church that loves to make God's love famous in our community, and frankly loves to be very present in our community and doing things in our community that express God's love in ways that make sense for people. And so one of the things that we have been doing for a number of years is walking the 4th of July parade and handing out water at the 4th of July parade. It's usually nice and toasty, like a day like today, and that we just find that people appreciate some nice crystal cold Terra Nova brand water that they can enjoy while they're enjoying the parade, and that it is handed to them by us, by our Terra Nova crew, whether that's men or women or boys or girls. It's really something that we do for all ages. And how it works is we gather together right by El Toro High School, and then we do a little quick briefing. Our parade float goes live and does the parade route. Band is playing, and that we're there with a big giant truck full of ice down water, and we're just handing them out and we're having a blast. And so we would just love to have each and every one of us participate in that. It's just one of those things where we can just use loads and loads of people to just walk the parade route and just hand out water and do it with a smile. So the way that you get in play is, and you'll notice that it's on this card here, is by just running show up on that Connect card that I talked to you about. So if you're saying, hey, I'd be willing to do that, I'd be willing to show up, and then we'll be in contact with you this week just to give you some final instructions, and that'll be great. And you also might want to see that there's this suit up thing where we want to encourage everybody that's got like a Terra Nova t-shirt to wear a t-shirt, one like this, and you might be like, yeah, I'd love to do that, and some of you have t-shirts in your inventory, but others of you, they're like, I'd like to get a t-shirt. So here's the thing. We printed a bunch of shirts that look like this, these Terra Nova Love shirts. We sold out of all of them. But we'll have t-shirts next weekend for purchase, and so come on back next weekend, get yourself a t-shirt, and then you're going to suit up the t-shirt, and we're all just going to have a blast at the 4th of July parade. Hope that you will join us. All right. Well, again, just wanted to thank you all so much for coming, and again, just what a great time that we're having this summer with the series that we're kicking off summer with. Glad that you've joined us for part 4 of God on Film. Let's go ahead and start it off with Jurassic Park.
I wanted to show them something that wasn't an illusion. Something that was real. Something that they could see and touch. Creation is an act of sheer will. Life will find a way.
We can't keep her here forever.
They find her, we're never gonna see her again. We gotta protect her, that's our job.
Humans and dinosaurs can't coexist. We created an ecological disaster.
Ellie Sattler.
Alan Grant.
You didn't come out all this way just to catch up now, did you?
You coming or what?
We're racing toward the extinction of our species. We not only lack dominion over nature, we're subordinate to it.
Come back.
I always come back.
That's another plane, right?
Not exactly.
Don't move. Bigger. Why do they always have to go bigger?
Alrighty then. Hey, how you guys doing? Welcome. My name is John, and we are, as Lyle said, in the series called God on Film, where we talk about movies that are in the theaters, and we pull apart the plot line, the struggle, themes that are going on, and we give away lots and lots of free movie tickets, and we've been doing that. That's a lot of fun. And so today is part 4, but I just got to tell you, in 2 weeks, we're actually beginning a brand new series I want to invite you back to that's called Summer of Stories, and it's about the parables of Jesus, and we're going to take a few weeks to talk about some of these magnificent stories. Actually, 30% or so of Jesus' teaching was in the form of these stories that he would tell. These famous stories. In fact, there are words and phrases that have entered our language because of the stories that Jesus told, like the word talents, or if you've ever heard the term Good Samaritan, or a lost sheep, or a prodigal child. These are all words that we get from stories that Jesus told. And some of these stories are so famous and they're so well known that we can actually miss how disruptive and how unexpected they actually were in their original setting. So I'm super excited about this. It's coming up in a couple of weeks, but tonight we're talking about this movie, Jurassic World Dominion, and it's the finale of the 6th film Jurassic franchise. It brings together the original cast with Laura Dern and Sam Neill and Jeff Goldblum, my favorite, and the new cast with Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard. And the storyline kind of goes a little bit like this without ruining anything. Almost 30 years after the catastrophe of the original Jurassic Park, 8 years after Jurassic World, the theme park, was forced to shut down, 4 years after the volcanic eruption at Isla Nublar, when in movie number 5, if you watch that, when the dinosaurs are rescued and they're brought to the Lockwood estate and then they're auctioned off, that's super smart. And then there's this fire and then someone lets them go, even smarter. So now dinosaurs live in the wild all over the planet, mixing with humans and animals, the world learning how to cope with this coexistence. And the official release of the storyline puts it this way: 4 years After the destruction of Isla Nublar, dinosaurs now live and hunt alongside humans all over the world. This fragile balance will reshape the future and determine once and for all whether human beings are to remain the apex predators on a planet they now share with history's most fearsome creatures in a new era. How many of you seen the movie so far? Anybody seen it yet? Yeah. How many want to now? I don't know. So there are a few themes and struggles that are going on in the plot that I was like, oh, we could talk about this. Like, for example, the theme of the entire franchise, championed by Jeff Goldblum's character, Ian Malcolm, from the very beginning, is this idea of the law of unintended consequences, the ripple effect of our decisions. And just because we can do something doesn't mean we actually should do it. And the willful ignorance, the utter stubborn denial of the destructive consequences of choices that we just keep making. And we've talked about that idea a number of times around here because we've all got some of that. We all do some of that. We have this amazing capacity to talk ourselves into really bad ideas just because we want to, and then we lie to ourselves about the outcomes, either that the totally foreseeable negative consequences won't actually happen to us. That won't happen, you'll see, or that we'll be able to manage and control them when they do. And one decision after another just goes really badly, and they keep making them, and we do the very same thing. But one of the underlying questions of the movie that has some really deep and profound implications for us, I think, is captured in a line in a speech made by Malcolm, played by Jeff Goldblum, challenging the hubris of mankind in general. And he makes this statement: human beings have no more right to safety or liberty than any other creature on the planet. We not only lack dominion over nature, we're subordinate to it. Which kind of raises the question: what does it mean to be human? Who are we? Why are we here? And what are we doing with it? And this really is the question of dominion. Do human beings have dominion over nature? Are we even supposed to? And your answer kind of depends on what you think it means to be human. And the overarching storyline of what the documents that we call the Bible, the documents that are collected in what we call the Bible, beginning with the beginning origin stories of a document known as Genesis, answers that question in a way that was absolutely revolutionary in its day, and I think still revolutionary once again. Now, these origin stories that we're going to start to dive into tonight raise probably as many questions for some of us as they do answers. Like, for some of us, this might actually be one of the reasons why you struggle with faith or struggle to believe in God or Bible or faith, because it's like, okay, you open up these documents like, okay, so the world, the entire universe is created in 6 calendar 24-hour days, and then the sun and the moon shows up 4 days after day and night, and then on page 3 there's a talking snake. So I'm out. It's like there are these things that are going on in the story, and when we attempt to read it from our maybe modern perspective of modern science, it just seems at best confusing, at worst just straight weird or strange. But believe it or not, and you may not realize this or know this, these stories would have seemed totally unbelievable in their day too, but for a completely different reason. The world in which these stories were told and retold and told again and again was filled with a lot of other origin stories, a lot of similar kinds of stories that we refer to, a genre of storytelling we refer to as myths, the myths of Egypt and Mesopotamia, Sumeria and Canaan and so forth. And it's a kind of storytelling that's all about why. Why things are the way they are, why the crops grow in the spring, and why everything dies in the winter, and why it sometimes rains but other times it doesn't, and why my child got sick, and why we're here, and who we are, and what it means to be human. These are the stories that answered those questions for people. And the central characters in all of those stories were the gods. Many, many, many gods. The sun and the moon and stars and rain and crops and fertility and sea and land and war and death and on and on and on. Gods that ruled over the chaos. Gods that were often actually part of the chaos, creating and causing the chaos. Gods who drank too much and fought and murdered and raped and conspired and betrayed one another. And in the famous Babylonian creation story or origin story known as the Enuma Elish, which is really just a celebration of their chief god Marduk and his greatness and violence and military supremacy. It would be read by the high priest of Babylon at their New Year's festival every single year to a massive crowd, to the entire population of the city, and then told again by parents to their children. This is the story of how things are the way they are. And in their story, it was during one of these like drunken, rage-filled wars that Marduk defeats the goddess of chaos, rips her in half, guts her, and then creates the skies and the oceans and land and creatures with the body parts of a butchered god. So that's a story. And then a full 6 tablets in, human beings finally show up. Who are we? And why are we here? And as the story goes, the lesser gods after this war who've been forced to do all the labor, they're getting sick of all the work and they feel like it's beneath them. So they go complaining to Marduk, and Marduk decides that, here's how he says it in Enuma Elish, I will establish a savage. I will establish a savage. Man will be his name. Savage man I will create. Upon him I will shall the services of the gods be imposed, that they might be at ease. And so he goes on to kill one of the gods that nobody likes anyway, and mixes his blood with the clay, and he starts to make humans. What are humans? What does it mean to be human? It's savages. Savages created as an afterthought to be the slaves and servants of the gods and the gods' representatives, the kings. And so, of course, they were enslaved by their kings who they called the image of God. And people in a story like this, they have no rights, they have no intrinsic value, there's no purpose, no meaning, no hope. This is the story you tell your children, and the violence and the injustices of the gods justified the violence and injustices of human beings toward one another, because people always become like the gods they worship. And so you can just imagine the kinds of cultures that these stories created. Of fear and superstition and the insignificance, the brutality, the violence, the rape, the revenge and hatred and slavery and drunkenness and murder. And that's how people lived, and that's how people died, and that was their world, because that was their meta-narrative, and those were their gods. Which is why God's people needed a whole new story. And these stories that we find in this document called Genesis, they weren't being told to satisfy 21st century curiosity. They were being told and retold and told again to challenge the dominant narratives of their world and flip those stories upside down. And so the story begins with a famous line: in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God, not the gods. And in the social, cultural context of many gods and generational warfare and violence and the chaotic, just haphazard, accidental nature of creation, what unfolds in this story, in the following nearly poetic lines of the story, is orderly and peaceful, and it's intentional, it's purposeful, and it is the most often repeated word in the story. It is good. It is very, very good. And the template of the story, which is really quite brilliant and unique, actually, the template of the story, the way the story is told, is the template of a week. It's actually a work week. The story is the story of the very first work week. Unlike the gods of the Babylonians or the Egyptians or the Canaanites, God works. He works hard. He enjoys it. Work is dignified, even glorious. And then day after day, he steps back from his work and he does something that maybe you've had the pleasure of doing every once in a while when you have a good day's work and you step back from it and you go, man, that's good. I did something really good there. And he steps back and he admires and he derives satisfaction from his work. And this all would have stood out to ancient listeners of these stories. They would have been like, what? What? The gods were not famous for putting in a hard day's work and loving it. And the whole point of being at the top of the food chain is that other people do your work for you. You don't have to do anything anymore. You can live your life of leisure, and that's kind of what we all want to do, right? And this story is completely different from that, but that leads to the most revolutionary idea of this revolutionary story, a concept that is so ahead of its time that we, I think, are still struggling to catch up with it to this day. It's an origin story that said something that no other story had ever said. There are no parallels to this story. Egyptian, Babylonian, Greek, Roman, at the climax, at the pinnacle of creation on day 6, the rhythm of the story, the rhythm changes to draw attention to something special, something new. Then God said, after everything else has been made, let us make Adam. Let us make Adam. Let us make humans in our image. In Genesis, human beings are the pinnacle of creation, not an afterthought, the greatest of all of the works of art. And in fact, not just the pinnacle, the very image, the image of God. Now, the Hebrew word that these stories are told in Hebrew, we translate them into English and many other languages. The Hebrew word for image is the word tselem. Let me hear you say tselem. 1, 2, 3. Tselem. Did you get the T and the S together? You got that? Tselem? Yeah, you got that. Which is really their word for statue or idol or image. It's the word that's translated over and over again as a statue or an idol. And an idol would be like the visual representation of an invisible being. You get that part, right? It's like, this is not the God, but this represents the God. It's this, and so a statue or a tselem, if you will, would be placed in the central sacred spaces of the gods, the shrines or the temples, so that the worshiper could kind of connect with the God and see the God and relate to it. And that image, that tselem, was thought to represent or even somehow to mediate the presence and the power of that God to the worshiper who's standing in front of it. And in the beginning of the story, I mean, get this is mind-blowing. God makes images of himself. God makes images, he makes tselem of himself. And then he says, you are never to make an image that would represent me. No idols or statues out of anything that I have created. Because on the one hand, God, the creator, cannot be reduced to anything at all in creation that he has made. But just as importantly, we are not to do that because God has already made images of himself, and any other image would be a false image of the creator God. In other words, the only appropriate images of God in all of creation are the people you're sitting next to right now. Living, breathing human beings. The people you did work with or business with or played with today. The only appropriate images of God in all of creation are living, breathing human beings. And so you are not to bow down to any other image of God, because you are actually intended to be this walking, living tselem, this image, this reflection to the world around you of the dignity and the nobility and the goodness and the efficacy of the glory of God, you yourself, and by the way, every other single human being you have ever met. And the ancients would have been familiar with this idea of someone being the image of God. But in their world, universally, there's no alternative to this. It is only the king or the pharaoh that is the image of God. The king is the representation of God. The king is the image of God. The pharaoh is the representation of God. And everyone else, savages and slaves. That's all the rest of us are. But Genesis is saying something truly remarkable, that all human beings are image bearers of the creator God, and that's what it truly means to be a human being. That's what it means for you to be yourself. Now that's revolutionary, That is revolutionary. It's unheard of in the ancient world. Again, there are no parallels to this idea anywhere else. But the next statement is equally revolutionary, and it follows from the first. God says, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may, what does it say this out loud with me? Rule over. So that they may rule over. One of the old school translations says that they may have dominion over it all. In fact, he goes on to say dominion over the sea, the fish in the sea, and the birds in the sky, and the livestock, and all the wild animals, and over all of the creatures that move along the ground. In other words, in complete contrast to every other surrounding worldview, God is saying, you are not to worship nature. You, by the way, not just your kings or certain special people, you are to rule over nature. Meaning, you are to steward and care for and be responsible for everything that I made. It's an idea I think we're still trying to get a hold of today. Not rape it and exploit it and abuse it and destroy it. No, that's what bad leaders do. Bad leaders do that kind of thing when they're in charge of something. No, this is to exercise dominion as kings and queens who reflect the very nobility and goodness and dignity of God. One Hebrew scholar translates the idea of rule like this. He says, it is to actively partner with God in taking the world somewhere. I love that. It is to actively partner with God. That God is looking for partners, not puppets. And to rule over his creation is to actively partner with him in taking what he has made further, to bring order to chaos, to bring order to the disorder of things, like the law of entropy, the second law of thermodynamics. Everything's all, like your garden is always in a state of getting worse, right? Until you put creative energy into it, which, by the way, is exactly what we saw God do in the opening accounts as he's bringing order and goodness to chaos, and then we step in and carry it further to work and create and build and serve and help and love and bring beauty and goodness to everything else that's here. You are created in the image of God to rule, to do that. In fact, turn to somebody next to you and just tell them, hey, you rule. Just turn to them and say, hey, you rule, friend, you rule. You were created for that. You're created for dominion. And then the story breaks out into a little poem. The next line of the story is actually a poem, a little song that goes like this. And so God created Adam, humankind, in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. Again, nothing like this in the ancient world. Only recently have we even begun to catch up with the dignity and value that's ascribed to men and women in the opening story of this document we call Genesis. And we get all distracted by like the science and the days and the age of the earth and the evolution of things and so forth. And we miss the magnificence of this amazing, amazing account and what it is trying to tell us. The Genesis origin story dropped a bomb on the ancient world and introduced a radically different and, again, unparalleled worldview. In the ancient origin stories, you are an afterthought of the gods, born a slave to serve them. You have no intrinsic worth or purpose. In modern origin stories, you are an accident of nature, born a slave to your DNA, with no free will, no choice, and no intrinsic value or purpose, of no greater value and of no greater rights than any other accidental bundle of molecules on the planet. You're just that. The Genesis origin story says that you are the purposeful creation of a brilliant, loving God who made you in his image to reflect his nobility, his glory, and his efficacy. I love that word, efficacy, from which we get the word effective or efficient. Efficacy is your ability to take on challenges, your courage and your capacity to accomplish things. And you are to reflect God's efficacy and his glory and his nobility to the world around you. Now, here's the deal. Whether or not you believe that, whether or not you believe that this story is true, and however you might even think the story is true, maybe like literally true or historically true or metaphorically true, or maybe you're not sure it's true at all, I think you would have to admit that's different. That's different from the other origin stories, either ancient or modern. But here's my question. What would happen if we were to adopt that story as our own? If we were to believe it? And by believe it, I mean bring it down into the operating system of our lives, not only in how we view ourselves and look at ourselves and what we expect of ourselves and think of ourselves when we look in the mirror, but how we view every other single human being and what it might mean if we actually were to live this way, live as if this is who we and they really are. The story begins, I think we'd all have to admit, with a high and lofty idea of what it means to be a human. But of course, that ideal has not often been reality, has it? In fact, in the very next story, Adam and Eve, whose names aren't names at all, they're the Hebrew words for human and life. Human and life, they don't rule the beasts. Instead, they are subdued by this mysterious beast, this serpent, who deceives them. And then fast forward to the following scene, their offspring, Cain and Abel. Cain is resentful of his brother and is warned that there's this beast named sin that's crouching at the door, and he must rule over it, literally have dominion over that beast. But he does not. Instead, he is mastered by his anger and his hate, and he kills his brother. And listen, we can all relate to that. Maybe not to killing our brother, but we can all relate to being mastered by emotions and impulses that we wish were not mastering us. And so, in a way, Ian Malcolm was kind of right. When you think about it, we have not been who we are. We have not always been who we can be or who we were created to be. We lack dominion not only over nature, we lack dominion over our own nature. Am I right? I mean, I struggle to master myself, let alone anything else. And increasingly, in our society, the self isn't even seen as something that is to be mastered, but actually something that is to be given into and indulged. We don't master. We don't have dominion. And this is kind of the reality of our humanity. Both glorious on the one hand and fallen on the other. And yet the story never gives up on us. It never stops believing that this is who we are. So throughout the story, writers and poets and prophets will drop down on this idea right here, on this ideal. So for example, Psalm 8. Psalm 8 goes like this, beautiful psalm, supposedly written by King David. It says, when I consider the heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is mankind that you are mindful of them? Have you ever felt that way, staring at the night sky? Like, how little am I? Why would I actually matter? Human beings, literally the Son of Man, that you would care for them. And then he says this, you have made them a little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and honor. You made them rulers over the works of your hands. You put everything under their feet. John Eldredge, in his classic little book, Epic, comments on this psalm. He says, earlier in the story, back in the beginning of our time on earth, a great glory was bestowed upon us. All of us, men and women, were created in the image of God, living icons of the living God. And then he says this, I love this quote, I dare say we've heard a bit about original sin, but not nearly enough about original glory, which comes before sin and is deeper to our nature. Original glory, which comes before the sin and is actually truer of us, crowned with glory and honor. It's what is truest about you. It's what is truest about me. And then there's this moment a little bit later in a document known as Daniel, the prophet Daniel 7. And there's these beasts that have come up out of the sea and they're devouring and destroying everything, which is the antithesis of what it actually means to be a human, ruling as the image of God. But it's something we see every day. Just the destruction of bad leadership, devouring and destroying. And then in this vision, Daniel sees the throne of God being set up. And there's one like the Son of Man, he says. One like a human, like a son Son of Man who approaches that throne of God in the clouds, and he is given dominion and glory and royal power. And then comes the explanation to his dream that he's having. There will be suffering and pain, he's told. There will be struggle and there will be oppression as beasts act like beasts in this world. But here's how the story ends, he's told. But the holy people of the Most High will receive the kingdom, will receive the dominion, and they will possess it forever. They will reign. They will rule. And then Jesus comes. And though people begin to wonder if Jesus is actually like this, the long-awaited Messiah, this anointed king who's going to bring justice and peace, the title that he seems to prefer to use for himself is this title, Son of Man, taken from Daniel 7, the Son of Man, the truly human one. And it's like he's showing us over and over again what it looks like to be human. What it really looks like to be us, the glory and the dignity and the love and the generosity and the mindfulness and goodness and efficacy of what it truly means to be human. And then in one of his conversations with his followers, he has this conversation with them where he says, you know how the rulers of all of the nations around us, you know how they exercise authority? How ruling gets all wrapped up with like power and money and ego and wealth and bowing up and trampling down and lording over. You know how that goes, how ruling looks. Not so with you. Not so with you. Among you, the greatest is a servant of everybody else. And he's redefining what it means to rule. He's redefining he's flipping it upside down. Everything's gotten mixed up in this world. Ruling, he says, has always been about bringing value to the world around you, bringing value to the people around you, propelling them, elevating them. And in fact, which, by the way, he goes on to say, is exactly how the Son of Man exercises dominion in this world, by serving, not by being served. So it's no wonder that when some of the first followers of Jesus began to describe Jesus and like who he really was and what he really represented, they take us again and again back to Genesis 1, saying things like this: the Son is the image of the invisible God, or the Son is the radiance of God's glory, the exact representation of his being, the image, the exact likeness of the invisible God. In other words, they're saying he's the one that truly fulfilled the destiny of what it means to be human, of what it looks like to live as the image of God in this world. The Apostle Paul, one of the first Christians, would go on to call him the second Adam, the second human, showing us how to do it. This was how it was supposed to look from the very beginning. And so it's no surprise then, as the story ends, that the very final document in the library, a document known as the Revelation or the Apocalypse, the closing scene of that document, Revelation 22, John the prophet, John the seer, has had this vision of the new heavens and a new earth. Everything's being restored. Everything's being made again to what it was supposed to be. And in that scene, he writes these beautiful words. He says, there will no longer be any curse. The curse is gone. The curse is lifted. The throne of God and of the Lamb will be in that city, and his servants will serve him, which is priest language. Priests who are serving God, who are doing work that serves God, and they will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads, which is a metaphor of identity. And then he says this, and they will, what's that word right there? Reign. They will sing with him forever and ever. No, they will sit in church forever and ever. I was raised thinking that's what heaven was supposed to be, like one endless song service. Which I think felt like heaven to some people, but not like me. Like as a kid, no. They will play harps forever and float around. No, they will reign. They will reign forever and ever. It's Genesis 1 being brought all the way back full circle to fruition. That's how our story begins, and that's how our story ends. It's dominion, created in the image of God, as royalty, as kings and queens to rule over and partner with him in creation. But, and here's how we have to end. If that's what it means to be human, if that story is even nearly true, if that's what it means to be human, if we're to believe that or live into that, if we were to try to regain that kind of truth for our lives, here's the question. What does that look like for us? What does that mean for us right now? Or you can put it this way. What does it look like to rule as the images of God right now? Because we don't have to wait till we get to heaven and start acting like we belong there. What does it look now to begin living as the images of God who reign? So as we wrap up, I just want to touch down into a few facets of life, and this could just go on for a really long time. I'm just going to touch on for 4, where I think we can and must learn to live into this. And the first facet of our lives is our work, in our work. Now, interestingly, this is actually how the language of ruling in the story of Genesis is most immediately applied. It's about Adam's or the human's work. So God puts human in this garden, and the language is used to work and keep it. In other words, what it means for him to rule is to work and keep this garden. And simply put, ruling in that context is like to cultivate and to plant and to irrigate and to grow things and to shape things. In other words, to partner with God. To partner with God in taking the world somewhere. It's like God says, here's all the raw material, human. Here's all the stuff that I've made. Now you take it further. You take it somewhere. Use your creative imagination and ingenuity to problem solve and figure things out and irrigate and plant and grow. It's like, just go, man, go and rule this garden. In other words, whatever your work might be. So whatever your work might be, whatever it is, wherever it is, here's the question for you. What if you no longer would ever see yourself as like a cog in a wheel, a clock puncher, a button pusher, a TPS form filler outer? What if instead of waiting for someone to bring dignity to your job, what if instead of waiting for someone to bring dignity to you, what if you just assumed it? What if you assumed it, and what if you brought it? What if you brought divine dignity not only to the work that you're doing, whatever it is, but to everyone your work touches, serving and blessing, just like the Son of Man exercises dominion in his sphere, whether you're a server in a restaurant, or you're like a barista, or a nurse, or a teacher, or a construction worker, or an office worker. You see yourself as, I'm a royal. I'm doing royal work. That's what I'm doing. And by the way, the moment you think that your work is not really all that royal, you just remind yourself of the Son of Man who came not to be served, but to serve everyone else around him. And that's what it looks like to be royal, to have dominion, to redefine what it means to rule. Now, I think you'd agree that for many of us, that would be a tectonic shift in the way we view work. I mean, that would be like a complete change in the way we even look at work, not as a curse, not as a drudgery, but actually as one of the primary ways that we live out the image of God in the world, partnering with him to move creation forward and to do good and add value to others and to things around us. What would it look like for you to begin thinking that way about whatever work it is that you do? And then here's another facet, because we can't go too far without thinking through this one. In our home life, in our homes. Now, some of us live alone, but many of us live with or around some other people, right? And this is essential to live as images of God, partners with him in moving creation forward. It is essential that idea would include how we treat the people closest to us. How we treat the people physically and emotionally and maybe even biologically nearest to us, how we propel them forward, how we bring good into their lives, how we bring out the best in him. And when I was thinking through what does this look like in this arena, one of the things I said, like, this is part of what this means, is that we seek to uncover the image of God in the people we live with and around. We seek to uncover the image of God in the people we live with and around. This is part of what it means to rule and to live as the image of God. So it's like my 3-year-old or my 13-year-old, maybe especially my 13-year-old, or my mom or my spouse, not my spouse, but maybe your spouse, or your brother-in-law. They may not always act like the image of God that they are. It's hidden between layers and layers of dysfunction and wounds and ways that they've learned to cope and react. The image of God, if it's in there, is sometimes very, very hard to see. But God keeps saying, that's who they are. That's who they really are. That's who I made them to be. And Jesus had this profound way of treating people as if they were who God created them to be, not necessarily how they were acting in the moment. He had this ability to treat people as who they really are, as who God had made them to be, not as who they were acting as if they were in that moment. And in doing so, he had this way of like uncovering the image of God in people, of elevating them, of bringing dignity to them. And I got to go, like, that's a challenge. I mean, that's a challenge to me, and it's maybe a challenge to you too, but here's the question. What if I just started to see that as my challenge? This is my challenge of what it looks like for me to have dominion in my home, like the Son of Man exercised dominion. What if I began to see that as my challenge? Well, I think you would agree that would be different. That would be a very different mindset of walking around my home. I am the image of God reflecting the nobility and the goodness and the glory of God to the people around me, whether or not they ever reflect it back. And then you just start to ripple that out, not just in my home life, but in all my relating. In my relating in and around my community. Now, this is huge. This is really huge because implicit in the story and how all of the original hearers would have understood this is this idea right here. The way you treat the tselem of a God is the way you treat the God. The way you treat a God's image is the way you treat that God. To disrespect an idol, to disrespect a temple, is to disrespect the God that idol or temple represents, because the image represents the God. And the same is true for us. The same is true for the way that we treat people, that we begin to treat every other single human being like we would treat God himself. This is a major theme in Jesus' teaching. You cannot say, Jesus would say, you cannot say you love God if you are treating the person in front of you poorly. You cannot say that you love God if you are treating his image right in front of you right now poorly. And in loving the person right in front of you right now who is in the image of God, that you are actually loving God. How does Jesus arrive at this conclusion? Well, it's because they're in the image of God. That's God's image in front of you. Now, can you imagine, just imagine with me for a moment, if God following, quote unquote, God following people throughout the centuries had treated every single human being as the image bearer of God himself, kings and queens in this world to rule on his behalf. Can you imagine how different history would be? Can you imagine how different the history of our own country would be if just the people who said they were God followers had done that the entire time? But hey, never mind history, because we can't change the past. Imagine if we just started to do this. Imagine if we started to do this right now. Do you think that might make a difference around us? That we begin to exude the image of God in our work, in our home life, in our relating in the community. And I got to hit one more because we would be incomplete without saying at least this. In our character. In our character. Simply put, if we truly are the image bearers of God, act like it. Like, be who we really are. Live with that dignity and courage and the efficacy. No more victim mindset, right? The generosity that my station in life requires of me as kings and queens, which of course sounds way easier than it actually is. But this is exactly what the first followers of Jesus realized that God was doing in them and through them. That he was creating a new person in them that was made in God's image. That God is transforming us and empowering us as we continue to work that out and cooperate with his grace and say yes to him. So what does it look like? What does it look like for you or for me to embrace that journey? To embrace that journey right there and go, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to see myself as I really am. I'm going to step into this consistently. I'm going to recognize those false scripts and those fears, those lies that rattle through my head, and I am going to confront them head on. I'm going to recognize my own pettiness, my ego, and my anger and unforgiveness as being utterly beneath me, unbecoming of me. And when I fall short of my true self, and I do and I will, man, I'm going to acknowledge it quickly, and I'm going to walk it back as quickly as I can, because I'm going to embrace that journey right there to be who I really am. See, Ian Malcolm was sort of right. Humans have not exercised dominion. We have not been who we were created to be. In fact, often we have utterly abused the image of God in others and in ourselves, and yet God keeps saying that's who we really are. He keeps saying that's who you are. He keeps making it, it's who he's making us to be. It's who we can be, and someday, he says, it is who we will be. It's our destiny to be the image bearers of God who rule, who exercise dominion on this earth. So, let's say yes to that. Let's say yes to bringing divine dignity in our work to everything and everyone we touch. Let's just embrace that that's what that means, to uncover the image of God in the people that we live with and live around, to treat every other single human being, no matter how frustrating they're being to us in a moment, as the image of God himself, and to be who God keeps saying we really are. Let's say yes to that. In fact, let's close in prayer and say yes to that right now. Heavenly Father, it's really kind of amazing to think that that might be true. It's hard to see it in ourselves. It's hard to see it in the mirror. It's sometimes very hard to see it in the people who are around us. Believing it requires us to step into a story that you keep saying is true and to actively bring that down inside ourselves. And so we just want to say yes to your story. We want to say yes to who you made us to be. We want to say yes to your image in us, to reflecting that image around us. We want to say yes to bringing divine dignity. What is that going to mean for us? To our work, to what we do and what our work touches, to uncovering the image of God in the people who are closest to us, to treating every human being as the image of God that they are, and to say yes to becoming who you keep saying that we truly are, that is truest to our nature. And I pray that for myself, and I pray that for all of us. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming tonight and being a part of this week 4 of God on Film. I just want to remind you before you head out or before you tune out to take that Connect card that Lyle was telling you about earlier. There it is. That you started filling out. I started filling out, and finish this. Throw this in the offering baskets on your way out. And again, if you're our first-time guest, thank you so much for spending part of your weekend with us. We would love to hear from you, and we would love to get you that movie ticket in the mail. But you'll have to know us. Let us know where to send that to. And so, take a moment, fill out this Connect card, drop that in the offering basket. And by the way, don't forget with this 4th of July thing coming up, don't forget to write set up, show up, clean up, or suit up somewhere on this card. And we are especially looking for people to just walk the parade with us, which is what show up means. Just write that somewhere on us and be a part of the big party as we walk down the street and hand out ice cold water. It's a blast. You'll love it. And kids can come too, so it's a fun thing for kids as well. They dig it. Of course, you can drop this offering envelope in the baskets on the way out as well. And then join us next weekend. It's going to be the series finale, which means you have one more week to invite a friend back as we jump into this next movie right here. Check it out.
Won't let our love survive. Oh, dry the tears from your eyes. Let's don't let a good thing die.
Hey, that's next week. Bring friends back. Get movie tickets. It's going to be a blast. If you want to hang out, we're having a special party next door right there for a review of our VBS celebration we've had all week long. It's going to be great. Singing, food. It's all there. Grab your kids. Actually, I think your kids, some of them might be there. You probably know more than me. Hey, God bless you guys. Have a fantastic week. We'll see you next door, and then we'll see you back next weekend for the end of the series.